The nightmares aren't about the men I saved in Kisan. They're about the one I couldn't, my own flesh and blood. It's back home. When they pinned that medal on my chest, I didn't know my son was already planning to use my dog tags for something no father should ever witness. I was stirring sugar into my coffee when the phone rang. Military instinct I answered before the second ring. It was Sarah, her voice cracking like radio static in a firefight. Michael, you need to come home now. 26 years of marriage told me everything in those 7 words. I remember the cold first, then the silence, then finding him there, suspended between heaven and hell, my tags glinting in the afternoon light. I am Staff Sergeant Michael Brennan, United States Army, retired. I served 3 tours in Vietnam. This is the story of how I saved my unit, but couldn't save my son. Saigon smelled like diesel and desperation that last night. We were holed up at Camp Alpha, waiting for our transport back to the world. The war was winding down for us, not with victory, but with an exhausted handshake. To the Brennan luck, Martinez said, raising a warm beer, without which we'd all be fertilizing the jungle. The other men in our unit nodded. 12 of them. 12 who should have been dead after the ambush at Key Sand 3 months earlier. 12 who went home to their families because of what the brass called exceptional battlefield leadership and what I called blind fucking terror. Save that shit for the ceremony, I told him, but I was smiling. Johnson, our radio man, pulled a creased photo of his baby girl. Never would have seen her if not for you, Sarge. I nodded, thinking of my own boy back home. David would be 15 now. The last photo Sarah sent showed a lanky stranger with my eyes and her stubborn chin. 3 tours meant I'd miss most of his growing up, but I'd be home soon. We'd make up for lost time. When we get back, I'm never leaving Mississippi again. Wilkins declared, his accent thicker after a few beers. What about you, Sarge? Reynolds asked. What's first on the agenda? Teaching my boy to drive, I said. Promised him before I shipped out this time. What I didn't tell them was how David had turned away when I'd made that promise. How he'd mumbled, whatever, in that new voice that had dropped an octave while I was gone. How Sarah's letters had grown shorter, filled with carefully neutral updates about school and weather rather than our son's mood or achievements. The chaplain stopped by our table. Spout smile chaplain's perfect for men about to go into battle or head home broken. Proud day tomorrow. Sergeant Brennan. That Bronze Star is well deserved. I nodded, uncomfortable. Medals were for men who did extraordinary things by choice. I just refused to let us die out there. Later, alone on my bunk, I wrote my final letter from Vietnam. David, it's coming home for good this time. Your old man's had enough of the jungle. It's looking forward to seeing you behind the wheel. So your mother might need sedation for that. I've got some stories to tell you, son. And I want to hear yours too. 3 more days. Dad, I sealed the envelope, knowing it would arrive after I did. What I didn't know then was that in 3 days, I'd stand on a podium with a medal pinned to my chest. While back home, my son was already taking my old dog tags from my footlocker. The tags I'd given him when he was 10, telling him they'd keep him safe like they'd kept me. I saved 12 men in the jungle, but I couldn't save the one who mattered most. That's the thing about wars. Never know which battlefield will break you. The ceremony was what you'd expect. Flags, brass, speeches about valor and sacrifice from men who'd commanded from air-conditioned offices. I stood at attention the way they'd trained me, while someone important pinned medal to my chest for not dying when we should have. Sarah sat in the front row, wearing the blue dress she'd bought for our wedding anniversary 7 years back. She smiled when our eyes met, but it wasn't the smile I remembered from before my first tour. This one had fault lines running through it. Your family must be very proud, Sergeant Brennan, the colonel said as photographers snapped pictures. Yes, sir, I answered automatically, scanning the audience again. No sign of David. Your son couldn't make it, he asked, following my gaze. School, Sarah explained later at the reception, her voice tight as she sipped punch from a plastic cup. He had a test. I nodded, like I understood, like I believed her. He's doing well, though. In school. Something flickered across her face. He's adjusting. We both knew what that meant. 3 years of adjusting, while I was in and out of his life like a faulty light bulb. Johnson appeared with his wife and baby, saving us from the silence that had grown between us. Sarge, you gotta hold little Katie. She's your goddaughter, after all. I took the infant awkwardly, surprised by how natural it felt. Sarah watched me, a strange sadness in her eyes. You were always good with babies, she said quietly. I remember how you'd rock David for hours when he was colicky. The baby gurgled. And for a moment, I imagined having another chance coming home to a child who still needed me, who hadn't learned to live without me. The drive home was quiet. Our house looked smaller than I remembered. The blue paint faded, the front steps sagging slightly. I'll fix those, I said, nodding at the steps. Sarah squeezed my hand. Come home, Michael. I carried my duffel to our bedroom, noticing the change's new curtains, a different bedspread, a TV in the corner that hadn't been there before. David, I called out. He's at baseball practice, Sarah said from the doorway. He should be home for dinner. I nodded, unpacking my few possessions. When I reached the bottom of the bag, I paused. My old tags are missing, I said. The ones from my first tour. Sarah leaned against the doorframe. David has them. He wears them sometimes. Said they made him feel closer to you. Something warm bloomed in my chest. Good. That's good. What I didn't know then was that my son had been suspended twice that year. That the baseball practice was actually detention. That the test Sarah mentioned was one he'd skipped entirely. All I knew was that my boy had kept my tags close, and that seemed like something to build on. I was home. We could fix whatever needed fixing. The jungle breathes at night. Something they don't tell you in basic. It inhales fog and exhales danger, a living thing with a pulse that drowns out your own heartbeat. We'd been on patrol for 6 days, near Kisan, 12 clicks from the nearest friendly position, when the world exploded. The first RPG hit our point man, Turner. 1 second he was there, slicing through vegetation with his machete. The next, he was pink mist. Before his body hit the ground, we were surrounded by gunfire. Get down, I screamed, diving into the underbrush. Next to me, Johnson was already on the radio, calling for support that was too far away to matter. Martinez took a round to the shoulder, spinning him like a drunk dancer. I grabbed his collar and yanked him behind a fallen tree as bullets splintered bark above our heads. Brennan, Captain Weiss, shouted from somewhere to my left. We need to fall back. But back was forward. Now we were surrounded, caught in a horseshoe ambush, standard NVA tactics. The only way out was through. Negative, I called back. They've got our 6. We pushed forward on my mark. I don't remember deciding to take command. Weiss was a good officer, but he'd been in country just 3 months. The jungle hadn't gotten into his blood yet. Reynolds was hit next, a clean through and through on his thigh. Kept firing, his face ghostly white. Cover me, I yelled, then sprinted to a better position, spotting the main concentration of enemy fire. 3 machine gun nests, overlapping fields. A fire textbook setup. I signaled to Wilkins, our demo man. He nodded grimly, already pulling grenades from his vest. What followed was 18 minutes of hell. I know, because Johnson timed it afterward, amazed we'd survived. It's 18 minutes of crawling through mud and blood, of hand signals and desperate gambles. It's 18 minutes where I became something else, not animal, just a calculation of angles and probabilities. The worst moment came when I heard Alvarez screaming for help. He'd been hit bad, gut shot, calling for his mother in Spanish. I was 10 feet from him, could see his eyes wide with pain and fear. But I didn't move, 'cause moving meant compromising the position I'd sent 3 men to secure. Moving meant 12 men might die instead of 1, so I stayed put and gave the order to advance. And we left Alvarez behind, his screams eventually fading as we pushed through the enemy line. By dawn, we'd broken contact, 12 survivors from a 15-man patrol. Captain Weiss was silent, deferring to me without acknowledgement of the change. We'd marched 8 kilometers through enemy territory, carrying our wounded, before extraction could reach us later. In debriefing, they called it exceptional tactical assessment. They put me in for a Bronze Star. They didn't mention Alvarez, or how I sometimes still hear him calling for help when I close my eyes. I made a choice in that jungle. 1 life against 12. The math was simple, the execution brutal. It was the right call. Every military textbook would agree. Years later, I'd face another impossible choice in a quiet suburban house. But there, the math wouldn't be so clear. There, I wouldn't recognize the battlefield until it was too late. I'd dreamed of this dinner for months in the jungle pot roast, mashed potatoes, Sarah's apple pie cooling on the windowsill. The kind of meal you fantasize about when you're choking down some rations in the rain. But now that it was in front of me, I couldn't taste anything. David sat across from me, a stranger in my son's body. His hair hung over his eyes, longer than regulation would allow. My old tags from first tour dangled around his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. "School going okay?" I asked, the question awkward in my mouth. David shrugged, pushing potatoes around his plate. "It's fine. It's on the baseball team," Sarah offered, her smile too bright. "Right fielder." Another shrug. "Bench, mostly." I nodded, like I understood what that meant for him, like I'd been there to see him try out, to practice with him. "I could help you train," I said. "Used to play a little ball myself, before, ... Before you left," David finished, finally looking up at me. His eyes were hard, older than 15. "David," Sarah warned. "What?" "He did leave, 3 times, stabbed." At his meat, the fork scraping against the plate with a sound like artillery shells. Not that it matters. The silence that followed was a minefield. I'd forgotten how to navigate civilian conversations. In the jungle, you spoke directly or not at all. Here, everything seemed wrapped in layers of meaning I couldn't decode. "Your father just got home," Sarah said finally. "Let's try to." "I know," David interrupted. "The hero returns." Right, I heard all about the ceremony. I set my fork down carefully. "I didn't ask for any medals, son." "Don't call me that," he muttered. "What, son? Like you know me or something?" Should reach across the table for his hand, but he pulled away. "I'm not hungry," he announced, standing up. The tags swung forward with the movement, catching the light. "Those helped me," I said, nodding at the tags. "In country, thought they might help you too." Something flickered across his face, vulnerability, maybe, or recognition. For a moment, I saw my boy again, the one who used to wait by the window when I was due home on leave. "Yeah, well," he said, his voice softer. "Sometimes they do." Then he was gone, his bedroom door closing with a quiet click that somehow hurt worse than if he'd slammed it. Sarah sighed. The sound of a woman who'd been holding things together alone for too long. "So come around," she said, though neither of us believed it. "He's missed you. He just doesn't know how to show it." I nodded, able to tell her that I recognized the look in our son's eyes, the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's built walls to keep the pain out. Seen it in the mirror every day in Vietnam. "I'm home now," I said. "For good, so we'll figure it out later." I stood outside David's door, listening to music I didn't recognize pulsing through the wood. I raised my hand to knock, then lowered it again. Some terrains You can't navigate without a map. And I'd lost mine somewhere between Kisan and home. I woke up screaming, my body drenched in sweat, hands reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Sarah was already awake, sitting against the headboard, watching me with tired eyes. This wasn't her first rodeo, Alvarez. She asked quietly. I nodded, my throat raw. And Turner this time. Pink mist everywhere. She handed me a glass of water from the nightstand. It's an old routine from my previous returns. It's 3:17 a.m. You're in Ohio. You're home. It's home. The word felt hollow, like a bunker after the enemies. Moved through. The door creaked open, and David stood there, a shadow in the hallway. My tags glinted against his t-shirt. Go back to bed, Sarah told him. Dad's fine. Is he? David asked, his voice flat. He didn't move. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, trying to steady my breathing. Just a dream, son. Old stuff. You were screaming about leaving someone behind? The words hit like shrapnel. I couldn't look at him. It's 'cause sometimes I started, then cleared my throat. Sometimes in war, you have to make calls. Hard ones, like leaving for 3 tours. The question wasn't angry, just matter of fact, which somehow made it worse. David, Sarah warned. It's okay, I said, though it wasn't. Ta was different. That was duty, right? He turned to go, then paused. I have a game tomorrow, if you want to come. The invitation floated between us like a tenuous ceasefire. Be there, I promised. After he left, Sarah settled back beside me. He's had nightmares too, she said quietly. Started after your second tour. Never tells me what they're about. I nodded, something cold settling in my stomach. I'll fix this. Sarah, some things can't be fixed, Michael. They can only be lived with. She fell asleep eventually. I didn't. At dawn, I made coffee and wandered into the backyard. It was smaller than I remembered. The swing set rusted and abandoned. David had outgrown it years ago. I spent the morning cleaning my tools in the garage, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. When I heard footsteps, I looked up, expecting Sarah. David stood in the doorway, watching me with guarded eyes. Want to help? I asked, gesturing to the workbench. Could use another pair of hands. A hesitation, then a shrug. Sure. We worked in silence, organizing tools that had gathered dust in my absence. His hands were like mine, calloused from baseball, with long fingers. A man's hands already. You still having those dreams? I asked eventually. He tensed. Mom told you? Want to talk about it? No. He set down a wrench with deliberate care. Do you? Talk about yours? I met his eyes, seeing the challenge there. Not usually. Then, we've got something in common. He almost smiled. Almost. Later, at his baseball game, I watched from the bleachers as he sat on the bench, never once called to play. The tags hung outside his uniform, catching sunlight. When the team lost, he walked past me without a word, shoulders rigid with disappointment. That night, we both had nightmares. His drove him to the kitchen, where I found him at 2 a.m., drinking milk straight from the carton. Different ghosts, same time, I said, leaning against the doorframe. He wiped his mouth. Guess so. It wasn't much, but it was something. It's 2 haunted souls recognizing each other across the divide. A beginning. I thought I was wrong. The principal's office smelled like industrial cleaner and disappointment. Mr. Harmon sat behind a desk, too small for his frame. Hands folded over a manila folder with my son's name on it. We're glad to have you back stateside, Sergeant Brennan, he said. With the careful respect civilians reserve for veterans, they're about to deliver bad news too. David's mentioned your service several times. Tira shifted in a chair beside me. This wasn't her first meeting here, I realized with a sinking feeling. What's he done? Okay, I asked, cutting through the pleasantries. Harmon sighed. It's not so much what he's doing, but what he's not doing. Assignments unfinished. Tests failed or skipped entirely. Okay, He had a 3.4 GPA before ... double quotes, he trailed off. Before my last deployment, I finished K's. He opened the folder, revealing a graph of declining grades that corresponded precisely with my absence. There was also an incident last month, a fight. Kava doesn't fight, I said automatically. Sarah's hand found mine. He does now, Michael. Harmon nodded. He broke another student's nose. The boy had made a comment about soldiers coming home in body bags. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. And David was wearing your dog tags, as he always does, he snapped. Harmon leaned forward. Mrs. Brennan and I agreed to suspension rather than expulsion, given the circumstances. I looked at Sarah, who wouldn't meet my eyes. He didn't tell me. You were in the middle of an operation, she said quietly. What could you have done? The principal cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, I'll be direct. David needs help, professional help. We have a counselor who specializes in military families. My son doesn't need a shrink, I interrupted. He needs discipline and structure. With all due respect, Sergeant, Harmon said, his voice hardening slightly. The military approach hasn't been working. Not at home, and certainly not at school. I stood up, anger rising like bile. I'll handle this. Sarah's face was tight with familiar resignation as we walked to the car. David was waiting for us, slouched against the passenger door, eyes defiant behind too long hair. Get in, I said. Voice clipped away it would be addressing an insubordinate private. The drive home was silent until David muttered, Guess you know everything now. Not everything, I replied, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Want to tell me why you're throwing away your education? Why you're fighting? 'Cause some people need fighting, he shot back. That's not your job. No, it's yours, except you're never here to do it. Sarah placed a warning hand on my arm, but I shook it off. You think I wanted to leave? 3 times? You think that was my choice? David stared out the window. Everything's a choice. That's not how the real world works, son. Don't call me that, he snapped. The same refrain from our first dinner. We pulled into the driveway. He was out of the car before I'd fully stopped, slamming the door hard enough to shake the frame. The counselor might be right, Sarah said softly. He needs someone to talk to. He has me now, I insisted. She gave me a look I'd never seen before. Sad, not angry, just tired beyond measure. Does he, Michael? Do any of us? I watched her follow our son into the house, wondering when I'd lost the ability to read the terrain of my own family. In Vietnam, I could sense an ambush before the first shot. Here, I was walking blind through a minefield of my own making. 2 weeks after the principal's meeting, I was sorting through my footlocker, organizing medals and patches, when I realized something was missing. The tags from my second tour should have been there, nestled in the tags corner pocket where I'd always kept them. I checked twice, then a third time. Sarah, I called. You've seen my other tags? The ones from '69. She appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a kitchen towel. David has those too. It's B. I frowned. Both sets. He took them after your last deployment started. I said if he had both, it doubled the protection. Her voice softened. It was his way of keeping you safe over there. Something tightened in my chest. Pride, maybe, or guilt. I didn't know. There's a lot you don't know, Michael. The words weren't accusatory, just factual, which somehow made them cut deeper. I found David in the backyard, shooting baskets at the rusted hoop I'd installed before my first tour. His form was good elbow in, follow through clean. Both sets of tags bounced against his chest with each jump shot. 2 for insurance, I asked, nodding at the tags. He caught the ball, holding it against his hip. Something like that. Mind if I join? A shrug that I took for assent. I removed my flannel shirt, rolled up my sleeves, and held my hands out for the ball. He passed it with more force than necessary. I sank the first shot. Muscle memory. Not bad for an old man, he conceded. We played in silence for a while, the rhythm of the game creating a language between us that was easier than words. He was good, better than I'd been at his age. When he drove past me for a layup, I felt a flash of genuine pride. You ever think about joining up? I asked during a water break. After school, I mean. The question hung between us like smoke. David's face closed down. The brief connection severed. Tia, why would I do that? Tradition, service, structure. He laughed. A harsh sound with no humor. Right? Leave like you did. I served my country, David. And who served us? He gestured between himself and the house where Sarah was. We had our backs while you were saving everyone else. The tags clinked together. As he moved, a metallic counterpoint to his words. That's not fair, I said, though some part of me recognized the truth in his accusation. Fair? He shook his head. Was it fair when Mom had to work 2 jobs because your combat pay was late? Or when I had to tell kids at school my dad wasn't dead even though you might as well have been? Then why wear these? I reached out, touching the tags before he could pull away. If you resent what they stand for so much, why keep them? Something flickered across his face, vulnerability breaking through the anger. Because they're the only part of you that stayed. The words hit like a physical blow. I dropped my hand. I came back, son. Every time, parts of you did. He tossed the basketball aside. K, the rest is still in the jungle somewhere. Before I could respond, he turned and walked into the house, the screen door slapping shut behind him. That night, I found a photo album in the living room bookshelf. Pictures of David growing up in 3-year intervals, the time between my deployments. A gap-toothed 7-year-old, solemn 10-year-old, stranger at 13 die. Sarah sat beside me on the couch. Okay, you wore those tags to bed every night you were gone, she said quietly. Wouldn't take them off even to shower. I didn't know. I said again, the phrase becoming a refrain of my homecoming. He was protecting you the only way he could, she continued. The way you couldn't protect him. Closed the album, unable to look at the evidence of my absence anymore. I'm trying, Sarah. I know. She leaned her head against my shoulder. But trying might not be enough anymore. I found him in my study, surrounded by ghosts. The shoebox of letters I had written home was open on the desk, pages spread out like casualties after a firefight. David didn't look up when I entered, just continued reading, my tags both sets singeing heavy around his neck. Those were private, I said, though there was no real anger in it, just surprise that he'd care enough to look. Mom kept them all, he replied, still not looking at me. Even the ones where you lied about how things were going. I moved closer, recognizing the letter in his hands from the faded coffee stain in the corner. March 1970, after Turner died. I'd written about the weather instead, about a monkey that had stolen Johnson's cigarettes, about anything but the reality. I didn't lie, I said carefully. I just didn't tell everything. Isn't that the same thing? He finally looked up, eyes too old for his face. You told Mom everything was fine, that you were safe, that it was mostly boredom. But I found these, too. He pulled out another stack of letters I had written to my commanding officer after my second tour, requesting to return for a third, despite having fulfilled my service requirement. Letters that should have been in my footlocker, not mixed with. Family correspondence. Where did you get those? They came to the house by mistake when you were deployed. Mom put them away, but I found them. His voice was flat. You asked to go back. They weren't making you go. You chose to. The accusation hung between us like artillery smoke. It's not that simple, I started. It is to me. He shuffled through. More papers. Did you ever kill anyone over there? The question blindsided me. though I should have expected it eventually. Every vet gets asked, usually by drunk strangers at bars, not by their own flesh and blood across a study desk. Yes, I answered, because lies had already done enough damage. How many? I don't know. Did they deserve it? I moved to the window, needing air, suddenly. Nobody deserves war, David. But you kept going back. It wasn't a question. These men you saved, the ones they gave you a medal for, they matter more than us. That's not their lives were worth leaving us behind. His voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion he'd shown. I turned to face him, trying to find words to explain something I barely understood myself. How do you tell your son that men who've seen combat together share a bond that's primal, stronger than almost anything? That sometimes you feel more alive in danger than in safety. The men in my unit needed me, I said. Finally, David gathered the letters, stacking them with methodical precision. So did we. He stood to leave, but I blocked the doorway. Ask me, I said, whatever you want to know about what happened over there. The real story, I'll tell you. For a moment, something like interest flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar wall. It doesn't matter now, he said. You're home. It's the way he said home, like it was a foreign word. He was still learning, cut deeper than any accusation. I am home, I insisted, for good this time. He fingered the tags around his neck, a gesture I recognized as self-soothing. I used to do the same thing in country when the jungle got too quiet. Sure, he said, until something else needs saving. He brushed past me, leaving the letters scattered like spent casings. I gathered them slowly, reading fragments of the man. I'd been searching for clues to the father I'd failed to be. One letter, dated a month before the Key-San ambush, caught my eye. David asks when I'm coming home for good. I don't know what to tell him anymore. The truth is, I understand this place better than our living room now. What kind of father does that make me? What kind indeed? 3 months home, and the walls started closing in. Neighborhood sounds, lawnmowers, children playing, dogs barking jangled my nerves like mortar fire. I'd wake, drenched in sweat, convinced I was back in the jungle. My hands reaching for a rifle that wasn't there, Sarah suggested. I joined a support group at the VA. I went to shut her up. The basement room smelled like coffee and desperation. A dozen men sat in a circle, some Nam, some Korea, all carrying ghosts in their eyes. I recognized myself in every face. First times just listening. The group leader Matthews, 101st Airborne, told me, "Talk when you're ready." I nodded, grateful for the protocol. For 3 hours, I listened to men describe nightmares I knew by heart, guilt I carried in my bones, rage that had no proper target. It was like hearing my own thoughts spoken aloud by different voices. When it ended, a guy named Wilson clapped my shoulder. Beer. A few of us go to O'Malley's after. That first beer led to a second, then a third. Stories flowed easier with alcohol, the language of war spilling out in a way I couldn't manage at home. These men understood without explanation. When I described the ambush at Key-San, they nodded in recognition of the impossible choices. When I mentioned Alvarez screaming as we left him, no one flinched or turned away. You did what you had to, Wilson said, his prosthetic hand curled around his glass. 12 men came home because of you. I started going to the VA 3 times a week, then 4. The meetings, the beers after, the late night calls to Wilson when the nightmares were too much, they became my lifeline. You're gone more now than when you were deployed, Sarah said one night, her voice tight with a familiar strain. At least then, we had letters. I was polishing my service medals, a ritual that calmed the tremors in my hands. They understand, Sarah, and we don't. I couldn't answer that without hurting her more. David had stopped trying to talk to me altogether, retreating further into silence. The few times I tried to connect pointoring to play ball, to help with homework, to teach him to drive as promised, he declined with the same flat, no thanks, that revealed nothing. One night, I came home late from O'Malley's to find Sarah waiting up, her face set in lines of exhaustion. David's failing 3 classes, she said without preamble. The school called again. I sank into the armchair, the room tilting slightly from one too many beers. I'll talk to him, like you talked to him about the driving lessons, or the college applications, or anything in the past 4 months. She stood, arms crossed. You're losing him, Michael. It's like you lost yourself. That's not fair, I protested, the familiar defense. No, it isn't, she agreed. None of this is fair. Not to me, not to David, and not to you. But it's happening anyway. She left me there in the dark, surrounded by civilian silence that was somehow more terrifying than any jungle night. I dozed fitfully, waking to find David standing over me, backpack slung over one shoulder. It was barely dawn. Going to school early, he mumbled when he saw I was awake. The tags both set, clinked softly beneath his shirt. David, I called as he reached the door. A tapie, this weekend, we could do that driving lesson. He paused, hand on the doorknob. For a moment, I saw something like hope flicker across his. Sure, he said, if you're not busy with your real family. The door closed quietly behind him. The soft click, more devastating than any slam could have been. I found my medals in the kitchen trash, buried beneath coffee grounds and eggshells. The Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the campaign ribbons all tossed away like spoiled food. I fished them out, wiping remnants of breakfast from the tarnished metal dot. Sarah was at work. David should have been at school. Instead, I found him in the backyard, sitting on the old swing set, his feet dragging trenches in the dirt. My tags hung outside his shirt, catching morning light. Want to explain this? I asked, holding up the medals. He didn't look surprised. They were in the way. In the way. I repeated the words, trying to understand. D's represent service, sacrifice. They represent bullshit, he cut in, finally meeting my eyes. Hero medals for abandoning your family. Something hot and dangerous flared in my chest. You have no idea what I did to earn these. I know exactly what you did. He stood, suddenly seeming taller. You left 3 times, by choice. By duty, I corrected, the medals heavy in my palm. Duty, he spat the word like a curse. What about your duty to us? To Mom working double shifts? To me walking home alone while other kids had fathers at baseball games? I stepped closer, anger rising like bile. You think I wanted to miss those things? You think I enjoyed being shot at, watching friends die, so you could have your comfortable life here? Comfortable. He laughed, a harsh sound with no humor. Is that what you think it was? While you were playing hero, we were just surviving. You saved everyone but us. The accusation hit like shrapnel, tearing through defenses I'd spent years building. Okay, I did what I had to do, I said, voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. No, he shook his head. You did what you wanted to do. Quote over there, you were somebody. Here, you're just another dad who can't handle regular life. My hand moved before I could think, grabbing his shirt collar. The tags jangled between us. You don't talk to me like that. I'm your father, are you? His eyes held mine, unblinking. Because fathers are actually here. I released him, stepping back as if burned, horrified by the momentary violence of my reaction. This was my son, not an enemy combatant. When had I stopped knowing the difference? David straightened his shirt, his face a mask of bitter triumph. See, that's who you really are, not the hero in the uniform. Skith the one who solves problems with his fists. I looked down at the medals still clutched in my hand, suddenly unable to remember what they were for. In that moment, they seemed like artifacts from another man's life. David, I save it. He turned away. I'm late for school. I watched him walk across the yard, shoulders rigid with fury and something else, disappointment, maybe, or grief. That night, I sat alone in the garage, cleaning my service pistol, another ritual that calmed the chaos in my head. The metals lay on the workbench, reflecting the single bulb hanging overhead. Sarah found me there, her face tight with worry. "Okay, David told me what happened," she said, leaning against the doorframe. I kept my eyes on the gun, methodically reassembling it. "I shouldn't have grabbed him." "No, you shouldn't have," she sighed. "But he shouldn't have thrown away your medals either." I set the pistol down, suddenly exhausted. "Maybe he's right, Sarah. Maybe they don't mean anything. They mean something," she said softly. "Just not what you thought they did." She left me there with that riddle, surrounded by artifacts of valor that suddenly felt hollow, like citations for a battle I had already lost. The morning was ordinary. It's what haunts me most. Sarah had an early shift at the hospital. Ascami made breakfast, scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, just like any other Tuesday. David appeared in the kitchen. Doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, both sets of my tags visible against his faded black Sabbath t-shirt. "Morning," I offered, sliding a plate across the counter. "KP's offering." He hesitated, then set his backpack down and took a seat. We ate in what felt like our most comfortable silence since I had been home. When he reached for more bacon, I counted it as progress. "Not bad," he admitted between bites. "Where'd you learn to cook?" "Survival school," I replied, smiling slightly. "They teach you to make anything edible, even sea rations, especially those." Trick was the Tabasco. We carried it everywhere. He nodded, seeming genuinely interested. "What was the worst thing over there? I mean?" The question surprised me. We'd established an unspoken agreement not to discuss Vietnam directly. Circling it like a landmine we both knew was there. I set my fork down, choosing my words carefully. "The waiting between firefights? Your mind plays tricks when it's quiet too long. Is that when you get the nightmares? Keen in the quiet?" "Sometimes." I studied him, wondering where this was going. "You still having yours?" Shrug that wasn't quite dismissal. "Sometimes." We ate in silence for another minute before he asked, "What was your darkest moment?" "The one that comes back most." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. I could lie, tell him something sanitized. But I was tired of the space between us being filled with half-truths. We were ambushed near Kisan. I began slowly. 15 men in my unit. 3 died in the first minutes. The rest of us were pinned down, surrounded. David watched me, his eyes unreadable. One of our guys, Alvarez, was hit bad, cut shot. He was screaming for help. I swallowed hard, the memory visceral. Even after all these years, I could have reached him. He was maybe 10 feet away. "But you didn't," David said. Not a question. "No, I didn't." The confession hung between us, 'cause I had 12 other men depending on my orders. If I'd gone for Alvarez, the position would have been compromised. More would have died. "So you left him?" "Yes." The word felt torn from somewhere deep. "I left him to save the others." David was quiet for a long time, running his finger around the rim of his glass. "Does it help, having people to save?" "What do you mean?" "It's like you had somewhere to run to, something bigger than yourself." He looked up finally. "At least you had that." The words carried a weight I couldn't quite decipher. Before I could respond, he stood and grabbed his backpack. "I should go. Test first period." I nodded, caught off guard by the abrupt end to what felt like our first real conversation. "Good luck." He paused at the door. "Thanks for breakfast. And for telling me about Alvarez. Anytime, son." The word slipped out automatically. This time, he didn't correct me. just gave a small nod and left. I heard the front door close. Then, the distant rumble of the school bus. I sat there, finishing my coffee, feeling something shift. Not healing exactly, but a wound finally exposed to air. I washed the dishes. Put away the leftover bacon. Called Sarah to tell her I loved her. Normal things on a normal day. I didn't know it was the last time I'd speak to my son. Teed, I didn't recognize. His questions for what they were reconnaissance before a final mission. If I had, would it have changed anything? Or was he already too far into his own jungle, beyond my reach? I found him at 3:17 p.m. The time branded into my memory like a serial. Its number on a weapon. He hadn't come home on the afternoon bus. Sarah called from work, asking if he'd mentioned any plans. Something cold settled in my gut as I climbed the stairs. To his room, calling his name. The door was ajar. Afternoon light slanted through the blinds, casting tiger stripes across the bed. Across his body, first came disbelief. A training exercise. Prank. Not real. Then, recognition. The unnatural stillness. The belt from my dress uniform. My tags, both sets, clutched in his fist. I moved on autopilot, cutting him down, lowering him to the bed. Fingers searching for a pulse I knew wasn't there. CPR, rescue, breathing. The techniques I'd used to save wounded men in the field. Useless. Now, on my own son, I called 911. Then Sarah. The words coming from somewhere outside myself. David's gone. Come home. Simple. Direct. The way we delivered casualty reports in country. The paramedics arrived first. Young men with sympathetic eyes who confirmed what I already knew. One of them tried to take the tags from David's hand. I stopped him with a look that made him step back. Those stay with him, I said. The police came next. Questions. When did you last see him? Was he depressed? Any warning signs? I answered mechanically, my mind cataloging details with clinical precision. The chair kicked aside, the marks on his neck, the peaceful expression on his face, like he'd finally found a ceasefire. They found the note on his desk, folded precisely, military corners. Addressed to the hero, in careful script. I couldn't read it. Not then. Not with strangers in our house. Documenting our tragedy with dispassionate efficiency. Sarah arrived as they were taking his body out. Her scream will haunt me longer than any battlefield cry. I caught her as her knees buckled, held her while. She pounded my chest with balled fists. Accusations I couldn't deny. You were supposed to watch him. You were here. Where were you? Where was I? Cleaning my service pistol in the garage, reliving old battles while my son fought his final one. Upstairs. After they took him away. After the police left with their reports and condolences. After the neighbors who'd heard the sirens retreated with casseroles and shocked expressions. Sat alone in his room. Evidence of him was everywhere. Baseball. Trophies from before I'd left for my second tour. Report cards tracking his descent from A's to F's, perfectly aligned with my deployments. A photo of us fishing when he was 7, before the war had carved hollows in my eyes, and the note still sealed, waiting like a landmine. I opened it with hands that had disarmed actual explosives without trembling, but shook now like an old man's dad. It's not your fault. You were trained to save people, and you did. I was never mad that you left. I was mad that you couldn't save me too. I wear your tags because they're the bravest part of you. The part that knew how to sacrifice. Now I know too. Tell Mom I'm sorry. Tell your men it was worth it. Them coming home instead of you, your Sony. Read it 7 times, memorizing each word, searching for clues I'd missed, warnings I'd ignored. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in my pocket, next to where my tags should have been. In the morning, they'd want decisions. Funeral arrangements, burial clothes. Whether to include military honors for a casualty of a different kind of war. But for now, sat in an empty room, standing guard over a battlefield where I'd arrived too late, where the enemy had been invincible, where I'd lost the only battle that ever truly mattered. They say there's no word for a parent who loses a child, widow, orphan. Nothing for us. Language itself recognizes the obscenity of outliving your son. The funeral home smelled like artificial flowers and disinfected. The director spoke in hushed tones about options and arrangements, his eyes carefully avoiding the cause of death. Suicide creates its own special silence. We have experience with military families, he assured us, as if that meant anything. Sarah sat beside me, a shell of herself. She hadn't spoken directly to me since that first day. Not blame exactly, something deeper, a fundamental rupture. In the universe, only mothers understand. Would you like military honors? The director asked. Given your service, Sergeant Brennan, we could arrange. No, Sarah interrupted, her first word in hours. No uniforms, no flags, no guns. I nodded. My agreement. This was a different kind of casualty. The question of the tags came next. The police had returned them in a plastic evidence bag, still closed in David's fist. They'd had to break his fingers to retrieve them. These should be buried with him, I said. Sarah's head snapped up. No, you don't get to decide that. We're important to him, Sarah. They killed him, she hissed, color finally returning to her face. Your precious service, your medals, your tags, they took him from us, just as surely as if you'd put that belt around his neck yourself. The funeral director retreated tactfully, leaving us alone with our rupturing grief. That's not fair, I said, the familiar defense sounding hollow even to my ears. None of this is fair, Michael. Her voice cracked. None of it has ever been fair. In the end, we compromised. One set of tags would be buried with him. The other I would keep, okay? Weight around my neck, heavier than any rucksack I'd carried through the jungle. The day of the funeral dawned bright and clear, a cosmic insult. Kade's classmates came awkward in ill-fitting suits, girls crying, who probably never spoke to him in life. His baseball coach, Kay, the principal, neighbors, bearing casseroles in shocked expressions, and my unit. All 12 men I'd saved in Key Sand appeared in dark suits, standing at the back of the church, a silent honor guard for a boy they'd never met. Johnson, Martinez, Wilkins, Reynolds were Reynolds all there because I'd made the call to leave Alvarez behind. All alive because of choices that had led through some twisted cosmic arithmetic. To my son, hanging himself with my tags, Wilson approached after the service, his prosthetic hand extended. I'm sorry, Mike. If there's anything, there isn't. I cut him off, but thank you for coming. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. We're all here because of you. We don't forget that. The words, meant as comfort, landed like artillery fire at the cemetery. They lowered my boy into the ground. I watched the casket descend, remembering how I'd once lifted him onto my shoulders so he could see a parade. How small he'd been then. How small the box seemed now. Sarah placed a baseball on the casket. I added a single dog tag on its chain, the one from my first tour, before everything went wrong. Before I learned to choose duty over family, as dirt hit wood with soft, final thuds, I realized I'd survived 2 wars only to lose the most important battle on home soil. Some enemies you never see coming. Some wounds never heal. We left him there, beneath a simple stone that gave his name and dates, but not the truth, that he died of a war wound passed from father to son, a legacy written in blood and metal. 3 weeks after the funeral, Sarah moved out. I can't breathe in this house anymore, she said, packing clothes into suitcases that had once carried our hopes for family vacations we never took. My sister's place. Just for a while. We both knew a while meant forever. I didn't blame her. Couldn't. Every corner of the house echoed with absence, with possibilities collapsed into dust. Her leaving was just another casualty report in a war that wouldn't end. Alone, I finally entered David's room again. It remained untouched since that day. Bed remade with hospital corners, chair returned to its place, blinds open exactly as they'd been. A museum of last moments. I sat on his bed, running my hand over the baseball glove on his nightstand. The homework never turned in. The college brochures he'd requested, but never opened. Evidence of a future he couldn't imagine. The journal was beneath his mattress. It's a black composition book, dog-eared and worn. I hesitated, soldier's instinct warning me of dangers ahead. But I was tired of not knowing, of missing signals, of arriving too late to battlefields that mattered. The first entry was dated 3 years earlier, when I'd left for my third tour. Dad left again today. Mom cried in the bathroom with the shower, running so I wouldn't hear. I'm not a kid anymore. I know what's happening. He gave me his old tags before he left. Said they'd keep me safe like they kept him safe. But if they worked so well, why does he have all those nightmares? I turned pages slowly, tracking my son's descent through his own words. His grades dropping. First fight at school, growing. Silence between him and Sarah. Mom works all the time now. When she's home, she stares at Dad's picture like she's memorizing it. Just in case, I guess. Then, a passage that stopped my breath. I wear Dad's tags every day now. Both sets, the kids. At school, think it's weird, but I don't care. As long as I have them, he has to come back. That's the deal I made. Deal like a contract with whatever gods control the fates of soldiers. Wear the tags, keep the father alive. I'd never known. Got another letter today. Dad says it's quiet, just patrols and boredom. The newspaper shows fighting near where I think he is. It's more lies to keep us calm. Pages of ordinary teenage concerns followed a girl he liked. A teacher who was a hard ass. Baseball games where he mostly rode the bench. But always, threading through it all, references to the tags, to me, to an absence that shaped him like gravity. Then, entries after my return. Dad's home. For good, he says. But he's not really here. His body's in the house, but the rest of him is still in the jungle somewhere. He doesn't see me, looks right through me, talks about duty and service like those words explain everything. I tried. I really tried. Asked about his nightmares. Tried to make him see I understand more than he thinks. But he's got his real family, and now those guys from his unit, the ones worth saving. The final entry, dated the day before his death, was just 3 lines. I get it now. Why he made the choices he did. Sometimes one life has to be sacrificed for others. I'm not angry anymore, just tired. I closed the journal, understanding finally arriving too late, like medevac to a fallen soldier. My son had been signaling me all along, broadcasting on frequencies I'd been trained to recognize in the jungle, but had somehow forgotten at home. I'd missed every sign, every attempt to connect, every cry for help disguised as teenage anger. I'd survived Vietnam only to lose the most important battle on home soil. That night, slept in his bed, the journal and remaining dog tag pressed against my chest like a field dressing on a wound that would never heal. 6 months after burying my son, I invited them to the house, saw 12 men from Kisan. They came on a Saturday afternoon, bearing 6-packs and solemn expressions, uncertain what to expect. Never been to a memorial that wasn't at the wall or a bar, Martinez said, accepting the beer I offered. This isn't exactly a memorial, I replied. More like ... accounting. They nodded, understanding. In war, you eventually tally the costs. Measure what was gained against what was lost. We sat in my backyard, the same yard where David had once played, where I'd found my medals in the trash, where I'd failed to see what was happening right in front of me. My son wore my tags. I told them, the single tag from my second tour hanging visible around my neck. Thought they'd keep me safe over there. A kind of magic. Johnson, cradling his beer, nodded. My Katie has my pocket Bible. Same idea, except it worked for her, I said, the words coming out harder than intended. A silence fell, heavy with understanding. These men knew better than to offer empty platitudes or to pretend grief had a timeline. You saved us, Mike, Reynolds said finally. That's still true. I looked around the circle at lives I had preserved through that fateful decision in the jungle. Johnson with 3 kids now. Wilkins, balding but content, a carpenter in Mississippi. Martinez, engaged to a nurse he'd met at the VA. Wilson, with his prosthetic hand, teaching history to high schoolers. 12 lives extended, families created, children born who wouldn't have existed otherwise. Decades of experience, love, work, contribution, all because I'd left Alvarez behind and led them to safety. 1 life traded for 12. The math had seemed so clear then. Now, another equation. 12 men saved, 1 boy lost. Was it worth it? The cosmic arithmetic made me dizzy. My son killed himself, I said, the words still strange in my mouth, with my tags. I was in the garage, cleaning the service pistol I couldn't let go of. No one spoke. No one needed to. I keep thinking, I continued, about choices, about who we save and who we don't, about what survival really means. Reynolds, who'd taken that bullet in the thigh and still walked with a limp, leaned forward. Mike, you made the right call in that jungle. Every one of us would have done the same. I know, I said. That's not the choice I'm questioning. They understood then. It's not the battlefield decision, but all the ones that came after. The third tour, one volunteered for. The emotional distance I maintained from my family, the ways I've remained a soldier, instead of becoming a father. We're all missing pieces, Wilson said quietly. Some of us just hide it better than others. As afternoon stretched into evening, they shared stories not of combat, but of struggles at home. Marriages strained or broken. Children confused by fathers who jumped at loud noises or checked perimeters in suburban homes. The weight of survival when others hadn't made it back. I realized I wasn't unique in my brokenness, only in its consequences. When they left, each man embraced me, not the quick, backslapping hugs of comrades, but the lingering hold of shared grief. No words necessary. Johnson was last to leave, placed something in my hand as he turned to go, a photo of his 3 children. On the back, he'd written, "They exist because of you. That matters." I stood in the empty yard, holding the photo, the weight of my remaining dog tag heavy against my chest. 12 lives saved, 1 lost. A calculus of pain and purpose no equation could balance. A year after David's death, I went to the wall in D.C., not for the first time. I'd been there when it was dedicated, but with a different purpose now. The black granite reflected my face back at me, older than I remembered, carved with lines of grief. I traced my fingers over names I knew. Turner, our point man, vaporized by that first RPG Alvarez left behind in the jungle. Captain Weiss, who didn't make it to the extraction point. Names among thousands, lives lost to a war, most people back home wanted to forget. I'd brought David's photograph, school portrait from his freshman year, before my 3rd tour, before the tags, before everything fell apart. His smile still genuine then, eyes clear of the shadows that would come later. I placed it at the base of the wall. Among the other offerings, flowers, letters, medals, beer cans, worn boots, tributes to the officially fallen. He's not on the wall, a voice said behind me. An older veteran in a faded Marine cap, watching me with knowing eyes. No, I agreed. Different war, same wounds. He nodded, understanding immediately. My grandson. 3 years ago, pills, Not hanging, but same difference. I met his gaze, recognizing the specific gravity of our shared loss. I'm sorry, I don't put those names on any memorial, he said, nodding toward the wall. The ones who die at home from what we brought back. They'd need a whole other wall, a bigger one, I said, much bigger. We stood in silence, two soldiers from different wars, united by casualties that would never be officially counted. Blame yourself, he said finally. Not a question. Wouldn't you? He sighed, looking at the wall, but seeing something else entirely. I did. Still do, some days. 3 tours in Nam. Came home all the way fucked up. Nightmares, drinking, the whole package. My son grew up with that, watching me check windows, sleep with a knife, wake up screaming. He enlisted anyway, Desert Storm, came back different, like me. Then his boy, he stopped, swallowing hard. The sins of the fathers, I murmured, something like that. He touched a name on the wall. We survive out there, but we bring the war home in our bones. Pass it down like bad genes. More veterans arrived as we talked, moving silently along the wall, performing their own rituals of remembrance. Some nodded to us in recognition. A few stopped to look at David's photo, intuiting its significance without explanation. There's a group, the Marine said after a while, meets Thursdays in Arlington. Parents like us. Veterans who lost kids to suicide. I'm not sure I could. You don't have to talk. Just listen. He handed me a wrinkled business card with an address. Helps to know you're not the only one carrying this particular rucksack. I pocketed the card, not committing, but not refusing. Either as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mall, I knelt once more by David's photo. I placed my remaining dog tag beside it, the metal warm from my body heat. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, I whispered. I'm sorry I didn't know how. The Marine waited respectfully nearby. When I stood, he placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. Touch of someone who understood that some wounds never heal. You just learn to carry them differently. Different war, he repeated as we walked away from the wall. Same wounds, behind us, thousands of names caught the fading light. Ahead, the long drive home to an empty house where another kind of war had claimed its final casualty. 5 years after David's death, I finally cleared out his room. Not to erase him, that could never happen, but to stop preserving the museum of his last moments, to let him be remembered for his life, not just its end. Sarah came to help. Our shared grief having gradually transformed into something quieter, less raw. We divorced 3 years earlier, but remained connected by the one thing that could never be divided, our love for the son we lost. I found these, she said, holding up a shoebox of baseball cards David had collected. Remember how he used to memorize all the statistics? I nodded, carefully folding a faded Black Sabbath t-shirt. Before I left for my second tour, he could recite batting averages like they were military coordinates. We worked in companionable silence, sorting through the artifacts of our sons. Too short life, schoolwork, concert ticket stubs. A half-finished model airplane we'd started together during a brief leave dot in his desk drawer. I found them dog tags. Not mine, but replicas he'd ordered online. Dozens of them, each bearing different names. I recognized some. Johnson, Martinez, Wilkins, Reynolds. The men from my unit. The ones I'd saved. It was researching them. Sarah explained, seeing my confusion. Called their families. Asked about their lives after Vietnam. I picked up Johnson's tag, remembering the photo of his children. Why, he was trying to understand, she said, simply. It's trying to see what you saw. Why they were worth saving. The revelation hit like mortar fire, while I'd been lost in my own memories. My son had been conducting reconnaissance, gathering intelligence, trying to bridge the divide between us. Did he, ... I hesitated, afraid of the answer. Did he understand? In the end, Sarah's eyes filled with tears. His note said, "He did." We finished packing in silence, filling boxes with the remains of a life that should have continued. Some items we kept: his baseball glove, his journal, photos from happier times. Others we donated: clothes, books, the telescope he'd never fully learned to use. The tags mine and his replicas I kept together in a wooden box that had once held my service pistol. A different kind of ammunition now. That evening, after Sarah left, I sat on the back porch with a box open beside me, each metal tag catching the sunset light. One by one, I ran my fingers over the embossed names, the men who lived because of choices I'd made, and the son who died because of choices I didn't know I was making. I thought about the Thursday group in Arlington that I'd finally attended. 3 years too late. Veterans like me, carrying the specific gravity of children lost to suicide. We didn't talk much about the kids directly, approached them obliquely, like reconnoitering an objective, too painful to view head-on. But in that careful circling, we found something like peace. Not healing, never, but a way to carry the wound with grace. I'd started volunteering at the VA, talking to newly returned veterans about the war that follows them home, about watching for signs in themselves and their children, about breaking the cycle of passed down trauma. Your son didn't die for nothing, Wilson had told me once, his prosthetic hand steady on my shoulder. Not if you use what you learned. I had been trained to save lives in combat. Now I was learning to save them in living rooms, in school hallways, in the quiet battlefields where the next generation fought their own wars. The tags clinked softly as I gathered them back into their box. No longer weapons or talismans or tools of self-destruction. Just metal, pressed with names, reminders of those saved and those lost, of choices made and prices paid. I wear only one tag now, not mine, but David's. It's not the military shoot kind, but a simple steel disc I had engraved with his name and dates. A reminder that survival isn't just about who makes it out of the jungle. It's about what you do with the life you've been given, especially when it's been purchased at so high a cost. If my story means something to you, please leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Man, subscribe. It gives us vets voice. And maybe, just maybe, it will help another father recognize the war being fought under his own roof before it's too late.